On today's episode of Locked On Suns, why the biggest, best thing about the Phoenix 120-113 win over the Toronto Raptors on Thursday night was that they didn't need Kevin Durant to be amazing.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen Friday, coming off of a big Suns win, 120-113. If you're finding it for the first time or you have not done so already, just go ahead and hit follow, hit subscribe, become an everydayer. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. So just hit that button, get a new episode in your feed every single day, Monday through Friday from here on out. Get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all season long. Today's show brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. 120-113 is the final score. Take care of business game. I believe the Suns never got behind in this game. They had a 39-point first quarter that basically carried them. The rest of the game was pretty close, frankly, but they were up double digits most of the way and end up with the W. We're going to go to our moment of the game, which is the beginning of the fourth quarter. And dating back to literally game one of the season, this stretch has been a challenge for the Suns. Now, when all three guys are healthy, less of a challenge. But even then, when even one of Booker or Durant is off the court, things have gotten a little bit dicey. And obviously, in general, the fourth quarter has been a problem. In this game, the Suns score 31 points in the fourth. Toronto makes a push, but again, that's what you have that huge first quarter for. And it's really just not an issue. I mean, the lead got down to 7. 7 was the lowest that it got to in the fourth, I believe. 5. It got down to 5, and then it got down to 7 later. But really, the Suns never had to sweat, and the biggest reason for that is Bradley Beal. And Durant was able to rest for the first 5 minutes and 20 seconds of this fourth quarter and finish with just 35 minutes. So, first of all, I think it's pretty impressive from a coaching standpoint and the players performing and the coach trusting them. Obviously, those two things go hand in hand. It has to be earned, but I would have to say that not a lot of coaches would have the confidence and the cojones, let's say, shout out Tim McMahon of ESPN or any of my, Spanish-speaking listeners here, but to not play Durant, to not panic, right? That's impressive to me. But of course it was earned, as I said, and I think Beal's the biggest reason for that. So yes, the Raptors were making their push. The Suns go into the fourth with the 7-point lead. It does get down to 5 a couple of times, but right from the jump, Beal gets a dunk, gets an assist to Bol. 3 later on, and that's about the time that Durant checks in. But really, even though, what is that? That's like 5 points and an assist, and the Suns scored like 12 points total. So pretty good, right? I mean, I think that's 7 out of the 12 points he either scored or assisted on. That's solid. It's not like some sort of huge takeover, but I guess it's a sign of a few things to me, right? Because think about who was playing in this stretch next to Beal, right? It was Nurkic, it was Bol, it was Gordon, and I actually don't know the last person. Why am I not seeing it? It was a bench-heavy lineup, and typically those lineups have not performed well for Beal. Like, only Beal on the court of the big three has not been always great, right? I have the numbers here. With Beal on and Booker and Durant off, the Suns have been outscored by 4.7 points per 100 possessions in 130 minutes this season. In this stretch, with Beal on, obviously Durant off and Booker out, the Suns were able to take a 89-82 lead to a 101-95 lead. So the lead ticked down by 1 point. Maybe that's not going to help those net rating numbers a ton, but it's certainly not as bad as being outscored by 5 points per 100 possessions. You basically played it even, and that's really, I mean, I know that might sound like a small victory, but with how many minutes Durant has had to play, with how much these early fourth quarter stretches have just killed the Suns, and honestly, again, how hapless some of these lineups built around Beal have looked at times, I think it's a huge victory. Part of why it worked, part of why Beal has looked better lately, is that he is making a concerted effort to get downhill. David Nash, who is just a good follow on Suns Twitter, used to write a newsletter, host a podcast, whatever, but you should still be following him because he puts out good stuff like this. He said that Beal has 62 drives in his last 3 games, so that would be Toronto, Denver, and OKC this week. Those 20.7 drives per game, if it were to have happened over a full season, which, of course it didn't, but just for context, that would be only second in the NBA to SGA. So you watch Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, how relentless he is, getting downhill, creating opportunities, sucking the defense in, kicking it out to his teammates, obviously getting to the basket, getting to the free throw line, and Beal is doing at least the driving. Is it as efficient or productive as Shai? Maybe not, but he's volume-wise up there with the most prolific downhill scorer in the whole NBA. The dunk that Beal had to open this fourth quarter was just exactly the perfect example of this. Just walk the ball up the court, Spain pick and roll with Nurkic screening and Gordon back screening and popping up top. They don't switch it, which is what you should do. Grady Dick is kind of caught in no man's land. It's a good screen from Nurkic. There's not enough size on the court for Toronto to really provide much help, and it's just a complete wide open drive and dunk. So that's why this is the moment of the game. All of that together. Surviving without Durant, thriving with Beal on the court, not collapsing in the fourth quarter, and seeing Beal's concerted effort to adjust his style really, really pay off. The other star of this game was, without a doubt, Grayson Allen. We'll talk about his game next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked for us this week with eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Kyle Anderson in the starting lineup with Cat hurt in Minnesota. Larger role, of course. We'll see what the production looks like, but a starting role for somebody on a good team is must play in the fantasy world. Kelly Olynyk, we just saw him. He is starting at center. Jakob Poeltl is out. He is obviously a box score filler. Vasilija Micic in Charlotte has been productive, filling in for LaMelo Ball since being traded over there for Gordon Hayward. Doo-Wop Reath, who has burned the Suns numerous times this season. Ayton has struggled with injuries, and Reath is a three-point shooter and shot blocker extraordinaire. Kyle Lowry in Philadelphia playing quite a bit and doing his thing out in Philly. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball can help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It's the same with your vehicle. If you have a personal need for any possible thing, 122 million parts over at eBay Motors. For your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly, whether that's a brake kit, a bumper, or more logistical things like a headlight or a roof rack. Whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, with these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Keeping it rolling, let's hit on Grayson Allen. Although I do want to mention, I don't want to overdo that, like the Suns were better with Kevin Durant off the court or anything, right? In that last segment, as far as the moment of the game goes. 35 points for KD, just one of those nights where they had nobody to guard him. He was not really phased at all. +8 in his minutes, 0 neutral in Beal's minutes. So the 2 minutes when Durant was on and Beal was off, although those don't always line up, the Suns outscored their opponent. So that being said, we sometimes can just glance right past Durant's huge games. I don't want to do that. But the big takeaway from this one has to be Grayson Allen's performance. And he's another player that we overlook a lot. And that's why I kind of coupled these guys together a little bit. But in this particular case, Allen's game stands out most. And the takeaway being, well, he keeps doing this. There's a future takeaway that we'll get to. But in the moment, he's just on fire. He has been doing this all season, but obviously this week, it's 2 straight games with 8 threes made. I mean, that's like Klay Thompson type stuff there. It's unbelievable. And it highlights something that the way he's been playing in these 2 games highlights something that Frank Vogel also discussed pregame. It's my first game back at the arena since before the All-Star break, between obviously the break itself and then my trip and everything. It had been like almost a month, so it was very good to be back. And Vogel discussed transition threes, right? Because if you look, the Suns have been fairly solid recently when it comes to taking threes, right? They took, in this game, 35. They took in the previous game in Denver, 34. Look, teams take more than this, but it's certainly higher than it has been at times for the Suns. 39 against the Thunder. You get the pattern there. And Vogel wants that number to continue to tick up, particularly by launching, by having a quick trigger on the fast break in transition. And Allen is one of, along with, I would say, Durant and Booker, probably 2 guys who do that. 3 guys who do that consistently. But for it to be with Allen, a guy who is not afraid to have the ball in his hands, even if we know he's not a real playmaker, he can handle it. He's quick, head kind of has his head up in those moments, isn't likely to get it swiped or turned over. So he can grab and go and pull up in transition. The team is now also starting to look for him, and his range is really deep, so he can take advantage of the defense kind of being on its back foot in a way where if they're trying to just get set and there's somebody streaking down the middle or spotting up elsewhere and guys are trying to kind of cover for their teammates in those situations, Allen is somebody who can just pull up from 28 feet, 30 feet in a situation like that and allow him kind of create space for his shot to not even really get contested. So it might sound silly, right? He's already been the guy most nights, even when the 3-point totals have been low, that has been driving that. So it's kind of silly to say, well, he'll be the key to doing even more, but he very well may be, because I think we know that when Booker is back, like these games where Grayson's getting over 10 attempts from deep a night, those aren't going to be consistently there in terms of spot ups and everything else, because, well, now some of those are going to go to Beal, right, or whatever. But if he looks for his shot in those situations, I think that can just go a really long way. Just adding another dimension to this team's offense and giving them kind of purpose when they push the pace, right? Like it's easy to just always be telling a team to play fast, but it's like, well, what are we looking for? What's our go-to? Who is engaged or like utilized when we push the pace? And I think that can help there as well. So guess the point being is expect more of these, even with this team healthy. He's had a lot of explosive shooting nights, and I think they're dedicated. They're determined to finding even more wrinkles and ways that he can impact the game. Which brings us to the bigger takeaway, I guess, or the bigger question off of his big game. Should he start? Is it a lock that he starts? I know it's a weird day to do this, but I want to use his big game to illustrate why he is so important, right? Everything I just talked about with the transition stuff and adding that, there is almost unlimited value in having a killer shooter, even in half-court situations as well. His ability to be comfortable, like I said, when he has to walk the ball up, or even more often when he is just attacking a closeout and keeping the ball moving. I mean, he's a good connective piece, frankly, like an actual effective version of what, we all kind of were pulling our hair out wanting Landry Shamet to be. That's all really valuable. And frankly, a lot of nights he is also one of the only guys that is agile enough and quick enough to guard point of attack players on the opponent, right? Not all of them, and it may not always be pretty, but he can do it physically. The body type, the low center of gravity, everything else, like he has the ability to do it. He wasn't stopping Jamal Murray, for instance, on Tuesday night in Denver, but he was providing some resistance. He was getting his hands in the cookie jar. He was fighting through screens. He was bumping and playing Murray physically. Like, maybe his defense is like a C+ or a B-, but that's not nothing. At the same time, I've been saying it forever, and the roster additions this team has made only confirm it. The best pathway for this Suns team to balance itself out and win across every phase throughout all 48 minutes against a variety of matchups and opponents is to lean into the offense and play as much size as possible and kind of junk up the game on defense, win the possession game, and allow your offense to take things home. The guy that kind of sits split in the middle of that is Grayson Allen, right? Because if you're highlighting or emphasizing the play, lean on your offense side of what I just said, well, Grayson's a huge part of that. If you are leaning on the put as much size on the court and junk things up side of what I just said, well, Grayson's probably not part of that, and you get to Royce O'Neale, who has been starting while Booker's out, but has not started when this team is fully healthy yet. I think something is going to have to shake loose for that change to happen, is where I come down. I was very hot on it when they first acquired O'Neale. I brought it up as a thing when a couple days ago when I was talking about how to survive without Booker. I said, maybe even start Gordon and O'Neale together just to have a little bit more defensive effectiveness out there and have Allen's shooting and scoring ability off the bench. I've been proven wrong. They beat Denver without Booker and obviously took care of business against the Raptors. So I think that, and the reliance on Grayson, the trust that he's earned, the consistency of his play all season, his availability and continuity with these guys when that has been such an issue, I don't think that the first game Booker is available back, that Frank is just going to make this change. But I just want to plant the seeds for a playoff situation to highlight how difficult of a choice this is going to be. Because when you take Grayson off, the offensive efficiency will get worse. Royce O'Neale, Eric Gordon, these guys are not as good on offense as Grayson. But there will be games and maybe series where they have to go bigger and they have to go more defensively oriented. And it's just going to be an interesting thing to track. The good thing is they have options and they don't have to focus and rely on just one strategy. They can mix it up, they can adjust, and we'll see if they do and when they do. Let's close things out with some observations from the Suns press conference announcing the All-Star game being here in 2027. Focused on the two guys I just talked about. Those role players who could be competing with each other for a starting spot. We'll get into that next. First, today's show brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for your role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which make it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, all while making the process easy and intuitive. I personally was hired via a job posting on LinkedIn to write about sports media over at Awful Announcing, which is what I do during the day. I found the posting, the salary was listed, the responsibilities were listed, so I knew I was qualified. I knew I was a good candidate. I went ahead and applied. I was also able to then click over to the company page, find the hiring managers in place. They were able to quickly identify my resume based on my profile and know that I was right. We connected, we scheduled the interview, and there we were off to the running. LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing a ton of hats constantly, so they are constantly finding ways to make the process easier for you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn. Become one of them today. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LOCKEDONNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's close out the show. So there were a lot of things said at the press conference announcing the All-Star game. They made it kind of a surprise press conference, but I think people knew because it had already leaked that Phoenix was going to be hosting. I had already heard through the grapevine that Phoenix was hosting around the time that the Clippers hosting was announced, even a few months ago. So, it's a typical event like that. The governor, the commissioner are there. They're talking. A video recording from Mayor Gallego gets played. People ask some questions, answer some questions, whatever. It's a lot of fluff. But after that, Silver and Ishbia did a little scrum, a little back and forth Q&A type thing with media specifically off of the, not on camera, not live, whatever, a little more off the cuff. And Ishbia first he was asked about spending, and he joked that he didn't know what the second apron even was, which was kind of funny. Silver commented on the All-Star game period and the competitiveness, and he said it's not fair to hold them to an unfair standard, and a past standard in terms of the players, and that just because the All-Star game used to be one thing doesn't mean we have to turn it into that. And he said, other leagues have confronted the realities of just health and viewership and attention and everything else. And, he said he felt confident that they would figure it out, but he was not pleased with this year's. I thought it was encouraging that Silver would be so direct, I guess, about the problem rather than kind of just playing nice. So that was one thing. But the The real thing was a follow-up to the second apron comments by Ishbia when he committed to his desire, at the very least, obviously he can't control how it all goes, that he wants to retain Allen and O'Neale. And look, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. That doesn't mean he's even confident that it can happen, because different teams can bid for unrestricted free agents. Obviously, those guys' priorities are going to matter. Their role here, even if the money might be equivalent, like Grayson Allen might feel like he's earned a starting spot. What if my prediction comes true and by the end of the playoffs, Royce O'Neale is starting over him and Eric Gordon's still in place for next year? And Grayson's like, hold on, I just had a career best season. I'm in my prime. I want to play. So there's a whole bunch of factors. Royce O'Neale, technically, let's get into that, actually. So my understanding is that the maximum that Grayson Allen can make is, on his first year, is $15.6 million. I believe that to be true because he signed a 2-year contract off of his rookie deal. I got this wrong a few times when I was talking about the extensions because I always forget that he signed such a short rookie extension. That 2 years off of your rookie deal, that never happens, so it always trips me up. But because that contract was only 2 years, I believe that the Suns only have his early bird rights. I may be wrong because it was still an extension. He also changed teams in there. But let's just say that that's true, because I am increasingly, with this new CBA, feeling like I'm going crazy. I think this would have applied in the old CBA too, but I'll use that as an excuse. The point is, let's just use that as kind of the benchmark, the baseline. And the reason I don't think the details fully matter is that would be a significant, that's almost a doubling of Grayson Allen's salary on only his first year. Obviously he probably wants like a 4-year contract. So you're talking about, at that point, 4 years, $65-70 million or whatever it ends up being with the increases each season. And we were talking about this team being overly expensive before the Ayton trade added salary, before the O'Neale trade added salary. The Suns are already one of the more expensive teams in the league. We're talking about how do they cut money and what, they're trading Dario Saric, they're trading campaign to save salary, to save money, and to not only make the Ayton and O'Neale trades that added a little bit of tax dollars to their bill, but then also now be on the record saying that you want to bring them back is a commitment to pay. So anything, if Grayson Allen were to, let's say he leaves and it is only like $12 million in year one, well, we will know that the Suns balked at the price, right? Because they can pay him more, and Ishbia said he wanted to. So what happened, right? Maybe it's role, maybe it's those other things, but that's kind of the state of affairs here. And then with Royce O'Neale, it's a little bit more cut and dry. He signed a 4-year contract that he is now at the end of, and so he is eligible to make, I believe, as far as I know, any amount of money. The Suns have his full bird rights. He could make the max if he wanted him to. It's not going to happen, but he could, right? So that's the situation. Royce is currently making more than Grayson. I don't think that would remain. I think Royce making at what he's currently making, or probably slightly less than that, is the right ballpark, but still, it's a line in the sand that Ishbia has now made. And I guess, too, just to tie a bow on it, it's the right thing to, it's the right way to approach it. You don't make trades for these two guys unless you're just not paying attention, without the idea of keeping them, because the Suns don't have a way to sign much of anybody outside of minimum players, as we all learned last year, and that doesn't go well, as we all learned last year, if that's your only method of acquiring new talent to fill out your roster. So when you go get a Royce O'Neale at the deadline, or you get Allen as part of the Ayton package, and they both are set to expire with their contracts, you have to go into that with the intention of What's our budget to keep them? Obviously, we want to. And what's that going to mean down the trickling of everything else? Do we need to get off of Nasir Little? Do we need to get off of David Roddy? Something like that. We'll see. And obviously how they play the rest of the season and into the playoffs is going to go a long way. That starting versus closing versus bench question that I brought up last segment matters, as does just, how does this team perform? Which lineups work? How far do they get? Who plays well and who plays poorly? On down the line. That'll wrap us up for the week. Great to be back. Please hit follow or subscribe if you have not already. I will have an extra show bonus for you Saturday night after Suns Celtics, probably one of the bigger games of the season. The Celtics are a little off kilter, 2 straight losses, and they come into Footprint Center where the Suns are rolling. So, should be fun. Get that show in your feed by hitting follow or subscribe. And I will talk to you guys then.